Hi, welcome to That Reminds Me Of, a podcast about film and the films that remind us of that film. You're here with Baron and the Doc.
And the Maestro.
Do we need another drink? Yes, we do. Yeah.
Baron, hello, where are we?
We are back at the Capitol, Doc.
And why are we here?
Well, we've just seen Bird Eater. Well, not just last night, a couple nights ago now.
Monday night, I think you're getting confused.
Bloody hell, it's all a blur now, isn't it? Written and directed by Jack Clark and Jim Weir. Starring Mackenzie, I'm going to read the list because it's a great cast, I don't want to miss anyone. Mackenzie Fernley, Shabana Aziz, Ben Hunter, Jack Bannister, Clementine Anderson, Alfie Gledhill, and Harley Wilson. I think there's a couple others, but this cast is fantastic.
Well, it's not just the cast that's fantastic, the whole film is bloody fantastic. And I've got a surprise for you. We have Jack Clark and Jim Weir right here.
Wow.
Right in front of you.
Right in front of you.
Welcome, guys.
You hadn't seen them.
Jumps here.
So glad you could join us, hey.
The magic of cinema.
Good to be here.
So, how has it been coming down from New South Wales to MIF with your film?
Yeah, it's been very fun. MIF flew us down, put us up in a swanky hotel. So it's all kind of, new to us, being treated so well. But yeah, it's been really cool. It's been cool showing it to Victorian audiences and getting that feedback and being in the room with them. And we've been able to meet some other really cool filmmakers as well. So yeah, awesome few days so far.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. And you've had how many screenings so far and how many are you going to have at the festival?
We've had 2 and we've got another one tonight. So we've got a third one tonight at the Forum.
Beautiful.
Great, biggest venue, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's 600 or 700 people in that one.
Yes.
It's a good crowd film. Like, I think it does well when there's just heaps of people in the room, you know.
I mentioned the cast because one of the things I really noticed about this film is how great the casting is. And I had this very strong feeling that we're going to see all these people become huge stars in the next, 5 or 10 years, however long it takes, because it just is such a strong cast.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope they all get a bunch of work on the back of it. It took us a while to cast. It took us maybe like 6 months of slowly finding them all and doing a bunch of chemistry tests. A couple we had worked with before. But yeah, most of them were like fresh faces for us. And I think they're fresh faces for like the whole kind of audience as well. So it means we have a bunch of freedom in like setting up expectations and like really having it feel like those are the characters. They're not performers playing these characters.
And let's not forget the directors. The directors were pretty good too. And there's a few, directing duos that have made it big. Normally they're brothers, like the Coens and who else?
Well,
A few others.
Yeah, we've been, the Cans are here. with
The
their
Cairns brothers, of course.
Yeah, and
course.
Raka Raka Boys as well.
Raka Raka Boys,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
How did you two find each other, and what's been the co-directing journey? Like, what would have been the ups and downs? Just the ups, if you like.
Ups.
Of that.
We met at film school. We met at the Australian Film, Television, Radio School. We spent 3 years studying there, and then we'd never planned to direct. We directed our own shorts, and the other would usually produce or shoot the other's film. But when it came time to we had a feature concept we were designing, and when somebody was interested, we sort of had the conversation for the first time, and then decided very quickly that it made sense to co-direct. I think just at this level, you need all of the help you can get. Like, the resources are so limited. So having another shoulder to cry on, or something, I don't know, somebody else just that's there, pushing to the same degree you are, ends up being the most important resource. Because and it's the same with all of the crew. Like, money is so slim, and you can afford to pay people. It's usually only like a ceremonial kind of gesture. But it's kind of their commitment to the project that keeps them, shooting for a long time. But we split the roles on set, so Jim would talk to the actors usually after a take, and then I would talk to camera. But we would have notes for each, but we would sort of have a quick conversation and then separate, and then go chat to various departments, which took a while. Like, the first ADs were a bit confused because we'll take a bit of extra time chatting between ourselves, so it took a while for the crew to calibrate. But it is becoming pretty common, so I think that sort of workflow will be more familiar to people soon.
Fascinating. Yeah, I've never experienced that. And you guys still like each other at the end of that process.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. We've got lots of things we want to talk about with this film, but I think for the audience's sake, it's a good time to ask you guys to give us the synopsis, the pitch. We would normally do it, but why would we do it with you two here?
Yes. Okay. It's about a bride-to-be who's invited to her own fiance's Bucks night. Some secrets are exposed about their relationship, and then the night takes a feral turn, led by the best man and some of the groomsmen.
What a great setup, honestly. It reminded me. We'll get to what it reminded us film-wise, but it reminded me of my 20s.
Yeah,
I'd
is that right?
say.
Yeah.
And which is equal parts sort of fun and scary.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. Was there any personal experience that led you to?
There were. I mean, a lot of the characters are based on people we know, real people. The only really fictionalized part of it is actually the Bucks party premise. Like, we haven't had like horrific Bucks parties. Like, I've been to a few, but they've usually been fairly tame, kind of like counter to what happens in the film. It's like there's all of this weight of expectation, and then it's just going to the pub with a few guys. Like, it's fairly simple, but but all of the characters are sort of what we drew from, and all the cast as well. Like, took them. Their research, they went and sort of would gather things from various people. So there was a lot of stories that me and Jim had told each other about relationships, and oftentimes how they would play out at a party or at an event. So we had both played this game of paranoia in the film, and me and Jim had basically the same experience in two separate parties, with kind of a couple having a breakdown as a result of paranoia. Because it's just a really awkward game, and that's kind of what it's designed to do. So we were stealing from lots of real people, but not the Bucks party setting itself. But there is something really interesting about its sort of setup, where it's just like you're built, or you're led to expect something really crazy to happen, or a surprise, or usually there's kind of almost like the threat of an adult performer, or a dancer, or a stripper, or something like that, is just kind of looming all at the back of a Bucks party, and everybody's kind of whispering and trying to figure out if it's a joke or if it's real, and it's usually like somewhere in the middle. So it's just a very funny kind of realm.
You're taking me back, and I think the threat is perfectly put.
Yeah, the threat's the fun part. Nobody wants a stripper to be there. It doesn't even matter if there is one. It's more just the first few hours where someone is joking, saying they do it definitely. They're coming, and it's fun. It's funny to play with that.
Did you go to an all-boys school or a private school, something like that? Is that where this, this began?
Yeah, I did, and Jim didn't. So he negs me about that a lot, but sort of channeled that into the film. I think there was an initiation night I went to for like the old boys for the rugby club of the school I used to go to. And it had very Bucks party energy, just like a group of 18 to 23-year-old men kind of roaming around the city in a big pack, just like looking for something to happen. I don't know, there was this really weird, violent undercurrent to it all that I was like right in the middle of, and I had to sort of feel it and recognize that I was a part of it, which was weird. But we were going, I remember distinctly like walking down the train platform in this kind of turtle formation of like 30 dudes, and people just like getting out of the way because they just knew that these guys were looking for trouble, not looking for trouble in like a
potentially trouble.
Yeah, they were kind of radiating this kind of juvenile male energy, which is fairly unique to Australia as well. It's just a big part of our culture, so definitely took a lot of inspiration from that.
Yeah, we kind of accidentally ended up talking about a lot of topical issues in the movie. We didn't really set out to do that because we don't think that's like the best way to make movies. But
yeah,
we talked a little bit about the more kind of subtle methods of manipulation that we see like among men our age in our kind of circles. Like the gaslighting, the coercion, types of behaviour where you can't underline it and say that's really bad, exactly this, but it's kind of, you zoom out and see a general pattern of behaviour, and then it's a bit more damning. But pretty quickly we were just talking about characters and having a really tumultuous collection of characters where every single scene can be dramatic and everyone wants something, and they all have differing points of view. We didn't want to make a movie about young people that didn't know what to do with their lives, the kind of like mumblecore indie movie we're pretty sick of seeing. So yeah, we wanted young people who had really strong points of view and differing points of view, and shove them all on a weekend away together.
Yeah, it comes across. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But on the idea of like the discussion of masculinity in film, I think kind of the way we approached it was through humor first, and then we arrived at like fairly serious conversations we were having with the cast and things. But I think, especially if you're trying to address a male audience, I think there's kind of, they just shut down if they feel like they're getting lectured to, which maybe is like a juvenile response, whatever it is. I think it's what happens with a largely male audience. So I think the way through is to give them dudes that they can laugh with and they can feel like they can recognize. And then sort of as the film kind of sours and starts to make fun of them, I think they're too far in at that point, you know. By the time we start using, you know, Charlie as kind of like an insane character and making, just like outright making fun of him, we're like an hour and a half into the film at that point, and they've already identified with him and they already feel like he's maybe like on the right side of the line, but like you've already got them involved at that point. So it was kind of humor first, but then kind of using that to Trojan horse something else in, yeah.
That's super smart. I think that really works, because you know, I imagine that pretty much any interview you're going to have or the review will talk about toxic masculinity at some point, but
of course.
It doesn't really feel, never really felt to me like that's what you were addressing with it. It's sort of like it's a more nuanced look at masculinity, which I think is great.
Well, people have been talking about the use of Dylan as well, and that was sort of our plan there, was to find somebody that the audience would package really quickly at the start of the film and think that they had a read on sort of what his arc is going to be in the film, and then using him in sort of like an interesting way in the second half, or perhaps pivoting who's like the antagonist, and people were growing closer to Dylan than they expect because of his performance. But yeah.
He was a really well realised character. He was the first punch in the face, dialogue-wise, particularly. Like that scene when he's introduced and they're having that conversation where they're not quite connecting. I thought that was just so beautifully written.
Yeah, well, that was the point of that scene, was just to kind of wake the audience up and let them. That's kind of when people feel like they have permission to laugh, or at least that was our idea. But people have been laughing before that, which is strange as well. They've been laughing in the hallway scene when Louis has been saying, you know.
Yeah, when I told the boys you were coming, they got so excited.
People laugh at that.
Well,
just because it's such a dastardly like.
It's so transparent. Yeah.
But it's all the humour is so relatable for blokes and Aussie blokes. You really can feel yourself in there, because we all for men it's always really humour first, and then underneath that is either the tenderness or the violence or both. So really well.
And you can just keep laughing if you want to. Like that's always an option. Is that like in the conversation or the night takes a turn, and you're free to just like keep laughing, because that just puts the shield up. You're not involved. Doesn't mean you're participating. You're just laughing. It's kind of like inaction, really.
Yeah. We had one really interesting screening at Sydney with our biggest audience, maybe 500 or 600 people. And there were just people laughing like the entire movie, laughing really, really hard at the start, like it was super bad or something. But then the laughing train just like kept on powering on, like long after we think it stops being funny. But like, so people were laughing like during like the third act as well.
Wow, sometimes that's the power of a big audience though, isn't it? As they feed off each other and it becomes something else.
Bit of a worry though for the future of men.
It was a big concern actually.
Well, let's get into the part where we talk about, reminds me of, the things we were reminded of.
Yeah, what did it remind you of?
Well, I'm going to give you a bit of a weird one to start with, but it hit me hard at about maybe it's like a third of the way through the film, and it's Where the Wild Things Are.
Okay. Yeah.
It's because I was just like, these guys are having a rumpus.
Yeah.
Like, and it's this extended rumpus
Yeah.
scene.
Oh, sure, they're chanting around the fire.
Just them, like they were almost swinging from the trees. And then I was like,
That's
well,
funny,
if
yes.
that's the case, then who's Max in this situation? And don't want to get the character's name wrong. It's Irene, I think. And although you could call it any number of characters, but it feels to me like she's suddenly in the middle of this situation that's sort of wild.
And she takes part. She takes part in like the third act as well. So
Yeah.
she sort of surrenders to it too.
Bit of an oddball one to start with.
No, that's
That's
fine. I like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
Should I follow that with
Yes.
another oddball
Yes,
one?
please do.
This may not make sense, but I wanted a reason to talk about the start of your film.
Yeah.
And to me, the gold standard of how to start a film with almost a film within a film is the Pixar film Up.
Great.
Yeah.
Just, I don't know how long it goes for, 5
Yeah.
minutes or something.
Yeah.
Pre-credits probably. And you get the whole life of this man and this, more importantly, this relationship. That part of your film is so brilliantly put together, choppily edited, and of the same
Yeah,
sort
I
of
mean,
standard.
very similar kind of goal, I suppose. Oh, the end goal was very different. I suppose really awful relationship, but kind of our plan was to use that language and then make people think that this is, because it's the start of the film, people are going to assume that we're trying to bond these two and believe their romance. And we do that for, a few minutes, or kind of, we kind of imply just because there's a routine that there's love there, but then kind of slowly trickle in evidence that this is a really strange relationship. I mean, it's there right from the start. Like, she comes just to watch him swim. Like, she doesn't take part. The first line is that she's a spectator. But it was all about making the audience think that we're watching the kind of like a romantic setup for the first few minutes, and then start to question what they're saying, especially because the music is so romantic as well.
Yeah.
It's an interesting sequence too, because you're watching it with some faith, thinking that you're going on a certain kind of journey, but there's something slightly wrong. You can sense it early on. I did anyway. There's something not right here. And you then get a sense of like, well, is this a bit of an unreliable storytelling,
Sure.
narrative situation where, anything could happen from here, which then kind of is what happens. Like your film takes such a series of turns out from there onwards. So it's a great intro. Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you're into it. That's a good reference, I think.
So, well, we've had one each.
Yeah.
So how we'd normally do this is just go around and keep
Okay.
going round till we run out of time.
Like,
So
you should think of a
who wants
strange
to go
one, though.
first?
Yeah,
Need-
we've
need to
given
be
you,
changed.
we've
You
given
can-
you two weird ones. You
Look,
can give us
No,
something that's
I've-
not weird if you
No,
like.
I want to think of something weird.
Yeah, I want a strange one as well.
Well, look, you had a poster on one of the walls.
Yes, well, that's probably
That's the one we're trying not to talk about.
That's one we've talked about so much in so
Okay,
many
cool.
interviews, Wake in Fright, because it's the godfather of Aussie cinema, talking about men, and it's just remained part of the conversation of national cinema since it came out. We didn't intend to steal that much from it, but more and more we realised the similarities. At a certain point, we're like, okay, well, let's get a poster in there. I had a poster on my wall that I just brought over to set and we put it in the background.
It's a fair one to mention, though, because I think that's started a conversation about how we're portrayed, Aussie blokes from outside, and not Croc Dundee or anything like that. That was later. And your film's doing the same thing. It's being a bit, it's making us look at ourselves squarely in the mirror.
Yeah.
Like almost 50 years later, not much has changed.
Not that much has changed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we also like the idea of having these private school boys, these North Shore boys, kind of inhabit the caricature of like the outback larrikin as well, how kind of closely those archetypes assimilate even today.
Any weird ones? Pop into your head
It's not
when
too
you
weird,
look
but Nashville is one that we talked about a lot, a Robert Altman film, and that's about Nashville when there's something like 50 characters, like this huge ensemble thing that constantly jumps between very strange characters, like from a very far, like very removed perspective, kind of like in our scene when you have Dylan taking everybody's drinks down at the riverside and the camera's all the way up on the hill and we can hear him clearly and we can hear everybody, but we're kind of like following him. That's kind of like Nashville for like most of the movie, and it kind of jumps between people and there's different events and they all cross over. But there's a particular scene in that as well when a man, a singer is giving a song in a bar, and there's 3 different women that we've encountered throughout the story that have all crossed paths with this man, and they all think he's in love with them. And he's written this song and is singing it for a woman in the song, and it jumps between all 3 of the women who all think it's about them, but they all have quite different reactions as well. Like, one of them is married, one of them has come to Nashville to find him, one of them is a member of his band who's married to there's only 3 of them, so it's a love triangle. So they all have kind of different reactions to thinking that he's written this song about them. And we use that for the sequence at the end of the film with Lady Lazarus, with the 4 boys, and they all have very different reactions to her and what she sort of represents to them. So that was a very direct reference for us.
Great.
Yeah, I haven't seen that, but that sounds
It's
great.
great. It's a terrific film, and he did really interesting. He was a pioneer of, or him and his sound designers, with kind of multiple layers of dialogue in a scene. So we would have 20 people on screen at once, but you'd be able to identify all those tracks, even if they're talking at once, and they all kind of
classic
inhabit.
Norton, isn't it?
Yeah, they all inhabit a very specific part of the sort of soundscape, and you can kind of tune into whatever you want yourself.
Yeah.
So technically, it's really. I'm still not sure they've completely figured out how they've done it, but
Sounds a bit like Witches of Eastwick, where everyone's in love with Jack Nicholson.
yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they actually tried to do something similar with the sound design in Uncut Gems, actually, because there's not as many people on screen, but they have people just talking on top of each other, and I think they looked into their Altman's process because they wanted to have 3 people talking at once, but you could hear them all.
One of the ones that came to mind for me really strongly was Death at a Funeral.
Okay, yeah.
Have you seen that film?
Yeah.
I think it's the ensemble of characters, the sense of comedy, and just the idea of being at an event that we all know quite well should run a certain way, and then everything else happens, and drugs get involved, and it all goes, way off the rails.
Ceremonies like that are really strong for storytelling, because it's just like a wedding or a bucks night or a funeral is like a story, but it's a ceremony, but it's a story when you transition it to a film that has its own kind of arc and it has its own structure, and then you can just use that for storytelling in fun ways. So there's a lot of options there.
Yeah, probably what we stole most from is Festen, or the Celebration Danish movie, at the 60th birthday party. That having like that really extended, uncomfortable speech at dinner. We took that for Dylan, and that kind of tone of like pitch black kind of comedy, really heightened drama, and how it mushes together kind of so seamlessly, is what we were kind of our gold standard of what we were trying to achieve.
And when you get to a larger stage, like we were limited in terms of what we could do, but once you get to a really big stage for an ensemble or something like Gosford Park or something, or Festen, you can have a supporting character who's just really weird and really funny to watch, but is so specific. Like the cook in Festen is such a great character. He's in like 2 scenes or something, but it's just like you get to be with him for a bit. You understand his function, you understand why he's there, you don't need an intro.
What you had to do was much more sort of focused and contained.
Yeah, everybody needed to be there all the time.
Yeah,
So.
yeah.
Speaking of contained, like that was the first of the Dogma
That was,
films,
yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
With all the enforced constraints that they put on themselves. And I'm sure, being a low budget, maybe you didn't force the constraints.
Actually, we stole something from Festen there. Because there was a rule in Festen that you couldn't have dream sequences. But there is a dream sequence in Festen. So he falls asleep and imagines his sister who has committed suicide, and he imagines her. But in order to not break the rules, he has a phone that's ringing in his room, and the phone just rings at the same pace during his dream. So it's technically still grounded, so they can get away with it, even though it's not. But we didn't commit to that extent. We thought about it, but when Louis passes out at the wheel in Bird Eater, there's the blinker going, which sort of transitions us into the flashback. And then there's one flash of his head and like the blinker, which is like half a frame. That was kind of like the last part of our idea. We did for a minute think about, well, let's just have the blinker in the background the entire time as like a score element. But we didn't. I think that would be a bit annoying. But
It was a great reveal, though, to his backstory.
Yeah,
that's really slotted in nicely. Well, I was reminded of David Lynch, and specifically Blue Velvet,
Yeah.
for several reasons. Firstly, the kind of ambiguous title that doesn't really refer to much on the surface. Maybe we can deal with that in a sec. But secondly, the start, like I said, with Up, in Blue Velvet, it's kind of like this completely
Suburbs,
idealised suburban
Yeah.
landscape, which is setting it up in a very different way to what the film actually is. It gets all crazy, obviously. And the third one was the Lady Lazarus scene, that just how that was presented, it was surreal. The whole film took a different tone, and that just felt very Lynchy, and I felt like I was in the Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
Big time. Yeah.
There was a scene that we removed from the script. We never shot it. I wish we did, but there was a scene where Louis admits it's one of the only times we had, because it's an indie film, you kind of had to cut a little bit of the fat, which in this case meant a scene where like there was no drama. Essentially, it was just Louis sitting in the forest, and he was telling Dylan and Charlie about a dream he had when he was at that property as a child, where he saw a naked woman. And it terrified him. And then we later found out, it was just serendipity that we were watching the David Lynch Art Life documentary, and he talked about in his childhood that being a formative creative experience for him, where he was sitting on his gutter once as a kid and saw a naked woman just like crossing the street at sunset. I think she had blood on her or something like that, but she apparently she didn't look concerned at all. She just kind of like walked across the street. So there's definitely some. I mean, I don't want to assume we're drinking from the same well as David Lynch, but there was also conscious references there for sure, and the fascination with the music in that sort of set piece as well. Like he uses music in such interesting ways in Blue Velvet, especially, and also the drugs as well, the heightened state Dennis Hopper's always in.
One of the only other movies with Nangs, I think, Blue Velvet. He's huffing the gas.
It's not. It's more
nitrous.
medical Nang. Yeah.
Medical Nang. Yeah.
That's a good rank. Yeah.
Any others for you two?
There's a
You wanna
weird
mention?
one.
Yeah.
We love weird ones.
The scene where Charlie gets caught taking the ketamine pill and totally denies it with Grace, and just like doubles down, triples down.
That's great.
We took a lot, or at least I did, from I Think You Should Leave with Tim Robinson. Have you seen that
No.
sketch show on Netflix?
No.
It's a sketch show where pretty much every character is someone who is in the wrong but commits to it and then doubles down and will just like straight-faced lie or totally commit. There's quite a few sketches that feel fairly similar to that scene. It's just we notched it a little bit more to drama.
Great.
But yeah, that's one of the sketches, a sketch about loaded nachos. We got Jack Bannister, who played Charlie, to watch before
That's great.
we shot that. Yeah.
That's great.
His performance was really cool, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because from early on, he was kind of the one we could rely on.
Oh,
Oh no. Yeah.
I thought, because he was set up against,
as a sensible one,
against
yeah.
his mate. And then, so you feel the pain that he's in, because he's, torn between the boys and the...
As it gets harder and harder to defend his mate, and he still keeps trying.
yeah. We loved working with Jack Bannister. He had no idea that his character was funny, like pretty much the entire time. He was so surprised. He was like, "Oh, this character's supposed to be funny." We're like, "Yeah, he's ridiculous. He's just like a walking contradiction."
Beautiful.
But yeah, there's something about his face, his stunned look. His eyebrows are able to go like so far up his head, just like way up here. The camera loves it.
Awesome.
I think the fact that he doesn't think he's funny is probably exactly
It
why he's funny.
really helps. Yeah.
Yeah. Should we go another round around?
Yes.
Let's do it.
I think.
Oh, did you have one?
I reckon,
Yes, you
I reckon
are
we're up
Still
to you, Jack.
thinking.
Yeah.
I think away from like the storyline, Mishima, we stole a lot of their score from Mishima. So if you were to play Mishima with like our opening, it would pretty much line up with the cuts, because we just used his and Philip Glass a lot. We used a lot of his music to temp our film, mostly for the opening, where we used. Because Mishima has this incredibly propulsive score that just like feels like things are picking up, and it flies through days and days and days, and has this really romantic feeling. But in Mishima, it's not used for romantic reasons. That's why we were drawn to it. And in Mishima, the score is romantic, but it's about a fanatic, or they're usually about fanatics or terrorists. And we were like, well, that's really interesting. Let's try and do something similar tonally. And that was a real wrestle, like with the composer. It took us and him a while to wrap our heads around, creating something new that had the same effect. And then we realized how complex like Philip Glass's stuff is. Like it feels so simple, like it's, you know, a couple notes and just repeats, but it's just like perfectly chosen.
Yeah, and also the red trees in our movie
Oh, yeah.
are taken straight from that one portion of Mishima with the red trees in the forest.
It's like a nightmare sequence or something.
Yeah, and then ours we justify by having the red brake lights. They're just like random in Mishima. But
Yeah, so that's better.
I love the score.
Yeah, ours are
I
way
love
better
the
than-
score.
Yeah,
It was really
yeah.
great. I was reminded of Train Spotting by Danny Boyle quite a bit with this film as well. And one of the things I love about Danny Boyle is just the way he cuts to music and and like the two things, the vision and the music are so intertwined. And there were sections in your film that really reminded me of that, and so beautifully done. Like you say, it moves the film forward with pace at times, and it almost feels like a music video at times as well. It's great.
It feels like we later found out there's a term called Mickey Mousing, which is actually it's kind of
it's a dig.
I wouldn't say it's offensive, it's a dig, but offensive to maybe composers. And we just sent that to Andres, just like, do this, but if you read it, it says like, it's kind of like a hack way of making music, which is just like it lines up exactly with what's happening on screen. But we really like it. Like I think it is satisfying. It does I think it's doing so much work in our film. It's like so much of the lead work, like the pace, it just kind of flies. But it's due to that, I think.
I think if you do it right and you do it at the right times, it's not there the whole way through.
No, yeah.
It feels really, it feels like it's on point. You know,
Yeah.
It's exactly right for the tone of those moments.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also just sections of that score that are just stand out beautiful. Like they're just, you know, you could listen to those all day.
That's cool.
So yeah, I just thought it was a great score overall.
Are we still going round?
Yeah, that was
go
a
on.
semi
Yeah.
one from me. So you go again.
Oh, geez, have I
you
got
have
anything?
one.
Well, I've got a whole. I might do a group. Reminds me of just
Okay.
of the parties gone wrong genre. If you go way back to Louis Buñuel, The Exterminating Angel,
Yeah.
and also The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie. Both of those centre around you know groups of people with you know revelations and that sort of thing. And more recently, I think in the last year we reviewed or compared Bodies, Bodies, Bodies and Sissy. Sissy being an Australian film.
Yeah.
And we thought there were a lot of comparisons between the two of them. But also with your film, when you get a lot of young people together doing drugs, revealing things about themselves, those both ended fairly bloodily. And I would argue yours is a better film, but it's in the same
Yes.
in the same sort of lane.
Yeah.
They both had party games in them as well. So does this
They
one.
did.
Yeah, it's hard to get away from them, to be honest.
Party games are good. They're very easy drama.
Yeah.
Having rules is really helpful.
And knowing that the stakes are going to be a lot larger than what's on the surface.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's great. Do you guys have any other?
Yeah, I
last
mean, I
little-
could keep doing laps.
Yeah.
There's
Jeez, oh, well, I shouldn't have given mine
called
5 in a row
I
there.
know.
5 Easy Pieces would be another one. And that was a combination of things. It's about a film starring Jack Nicholson, Bob Rafaelson film about a man who's escaping his childhood as being a maestro, like pianist. And he's left that privilege behind because he didn't want to be a part of that, and has like costumed himself as like a blue collar worker and is working in the oil fields, just like luxuriating in like lower class kind of living standards, and like goes bowling and gets drunk every night. And so it's this weird kind of performance of what he thinks it is to escape privilege, but he gets a call that his dad's sick, so he has to go back home. He has to go back to his house, which is literally on an island in Washington or something, and kind of confront his old family and make a decision whether or not he wants to kind of disappear again. And we used that for Dylan a lot, even though it's less on the text level than we had originally thought, where Dylan's character was quite specifically written to be somebody who has come from immense privilege but has dressed himself and carries himself to appear like a blue collar worker. Like he has the boots, he looks like a labourer, and he talks different to all of his friends, even though he's kind of the wealthiest out of all of them. But he's just come back from a trip to Mexico that's probably funded by his parents. Now he's living with his parents, but it's all about this like performance that he builds up around himself. And then he has to make a decision at the end of the film whether or not he kind of wants to reflect on himself or just kind of disappear again. Yeah, that was quite a direct reference for us. But it's a really interesting character, and I think it's an interesting idea now. I think, and it's something that we're interested in talking about further, where like Eat the Rich film at the moment is fun, it's funny to watch, but I think a character that might bury into an audience a bit more is somebody that is aware of their privilege on screen and is trying to escape it or wants to escape or professes to want to escape it but is not doing anything about it. At least I find that a lot more interesting, and that's very present in Five Easy Pieces, and I feel like that's going to come back pretty soon as kind of like a character type.
You got great references.
Yeah.
I'm sort of jealous of the film school experience because I feel like you probably had the opportunity to.
Well, they got a good
really
library.
absorb yourself.
They taught us some things, but it was more about we had like a little film club between us, because the best thing about film school that we kind of took into our own thing was like making yourself watch something. Like once you have a bit of experience, or you go to uni and they say you have to watch this film even though you don't want to. It's, you're tired and it's 3 o'clock and you want to have a nap or whatever, but you have to watch this. And then when that finished after the first year, we wanted to keep that up, so we would just kind of make ourselves watch whatever.
Yeah, very regularly skipping class to go watch a movie in the library. Yeah, that's the best.
Skipping film class to watch
To do
films.
your own film class.
Yes.
But the idea of like using a film as a reference is like it's going to happen, because every time you approach a scene, it's just like making a film's really hard, and you're gonna have plans about how this scene is gonna be like the first ever to be shot like this, and then you get on set and like, you're not going to be able to shoot it that way because the light's different. So you're just like, panic mode. Every single scene you're going into panic mode to some degree, and then you go like, okay, well, what does the scene look like? And you just think about every scene you've ever seen in a movie just automatically. So it's kind of you're going to be referencing. You're going to be taking from like a movie that you've seen.
We're getting the wrap up.
Yep.
Kick, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. I think they're going to get this. The screen's going to come down and
Crash down on us.
we're going to do it. They're going to do a screening here very shortly.
That's it.
Yeah, I think we could have gone another round or two.
We could
but
have easily gone more rounds. You guys, like of all the people we've interviewed so far, you've come at us with the most references, which is great.
That's good.
I love it. I love
That's
it.
good.
Well, I hope the screening tonight goes really well. I hope the film continues to have a great festival run and
Thank you.
a theatrical release.
Yeah,
maybe.
theatrical release on the cards. So,
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
great.
we're very excited for that.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for having us.